Hello there. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. That was stupid. What's going on, everyone? I'm Jay, Channel Square Pegs. Glad you guys are here today. I am taking a look at every single Star Wars game released on the Nintendo Switch and ranking them. So what do you say? Let's get it started.
As a lifelong I can't say lifelong, it came out when I was in my 20s. Okay, as someone who has loved the clones for a couple of decades, there we go, that makes more sense. Republic Commando was a game that I absolutely adored when it originally released, and it's something that on the Switch is just almost perfection. Like, the things that knock the game down are the things that would have knocked the original release down as well. Like, there are certain implementations that are just curious and don't really feel terribly intuitive because it's not terribly intuitive, so those knock the game down a bit. But from a gameplay perspective, this game is a work of art. Like, it's a phenomenal tactical first-person shooter. You get to control Delta Squad, you have different abilities for each character, you have different objectives for each level, and you have to be able to move around and position your squad mates and use their abilities to be able to get through different levels and complete objectives accurately. It's a very linear game. It's not something that's going to have a lot of branching paths or anything like that, and it's not something where I look at it and I realize that this could have been something a little bit more if this was developed for modern consoles, and I think that's kind of the revisionist history that we all kind of fall prey to when we start looking at older games, where we compare it to something modern and say, well, if it did something like this, it would have been even better. Of course it would, but this is a game that's 20 years old at this point, and for something that is that old to be as good as it still is and to be as enjoyable as it still is absolutely remarkable. Star Wars Republic Commando is a beautiful game that does so much incredibly well. It's something that I've offered up as a hidden gem on the Nintendo eShop before, and I actually own it physically, coupled with Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. I think this is just an absolutely magnificent game, an absolutely marvelous title, and despite the fact that a lot of those flaws are inherent and it's not necessarily something for modern audiences that I think they would fall head over heels in love with, I have to give this one an A. It's a great game, and it is a ton of fun to play. Star Wars Episode 1 Racer is legitimately one of my favorite games. I have loved it since the first time I played it. I loved the N64 version. I loved the arcade cabinet that they had. I thought that was absolutely brilliant. I liked it on the Dreamcast, and I love it on the Nintendo Switch. We get updated graphics, we get tight controls, we get the same fantastic gameplay that we had in its original release. It just looks better, and I can play it portably and take it with me. It's one of those games where, even though I look at it, and I'm talking how much I love it right now, and I do, it's something I truly adore, but when I stop and take a look at it, there are some things that it doesn't do terribly well. It's a very easy game. Like, once you get the lead, that's pretty much the challenge is over at that point. It's just environmental stuff you need to worry about, because no one's catching up to you when you have the lead. It's just the way the AI works. The sound isn't great. The textures, while they are updated, the graphics still are pretty choppy because it is an N64 game, so things still look a little chunky and don't really blend together perfectly well. So I do have to look at it realistically and say there are some things that knock it down a little bit. It is a game I love, but it is a love with warts and all. So Star Wars Episode 1 Racer, despite the fact that I love it, despite the fact that I think it is an absolutely fantastic racing game and a ton of fun to play, I have to give it a B. I think it is above average, but it doesn't quite get to that next tier of exceptionalism. It's good, but it's not that good. Now, I've mentioned Star Wars Pinball in the past. I think it is an absolute hidden gem on the Nintendo Switch. It's a fantastic collection of digital pinball titles. There's 19 tables in all on this cartridge, which is fantastic. And they cover all aspects of the Star Wars saga, with the exception of, like, The Mandalorian, because this released before that premiered. But you have Clone Wars, you have Rebels, you have Rogue One, you have Solo, you have the original trilogy, you have the prequels, you have the sequel trilogy. There's so much to enjoy about this game. The tables all look spectacular, and they all play differently enough that you're going to want to explore each one to find your personal favorite. For me, that's Rebels, but there's so much to like here. Like, if you love digital pinball, this game is for you, because it's just a smorgasbord of amazing games. And if you don't like digital pinball, I can see you kind of rolling your eyes at this, and I understand that, because this isn't a game for everybody, but this is a game for me. This is so far up my alley, it's not even funny. I have put countless hours into this. I love the hot seat mode where you're able to swap between players on a local game. There's online leaderboards, there's all kinds of activities and different missions that you're able to go on. There's unlockables, like abilities that you can unlock, force abilities that can make you get higher scores or be able to like manipulate the table a little bit more. There's just a lot going on here, and a lot that I really, really appreciate. I'm talking very fondly of this game, and truth be told, it is one of my favorite games on the Switch, but it's not something that I'm going to say is a perfect game, because it's video pinball at the end of the day. It's not for everybody. So for me, this would probably be ranked higher, but if I look at it as a whole, I have to give this an A. A very respectable entry, a very fun game, but not quite perfect. When I tell you that Knights of the Old Republic is a game that completely changed my outlook on gaming, trust me when I tell you this, because this is a game that made me believe in Western developers. I loved companies like LucasArts, and yeah, those are definitely Western developers, and that's one thing to say that, but I didn't really see a lot of Western developed games from the point of like the early 90s that really made me stand up and take notice until Knights of the Old Republic. Knights of the Old Republic made me buy an Xbox. I wanted to play this game so badly. I wanted to be involved in Star Wars, in that universe, that it made me buy an entirely new console. It made me a believer in Microsoft as a series of game developers and as a console of viability. And the Nintendo Switch port of this game does so much so well. The visuals have been upgraded, the combat is still solid, the narrative choices and the branching path of the character development as you go through it is still present. Your character will change appearance based on what light side or dark side choices you make, and it's just such a wonderful, fully realized game that, to me, is the epitome of what I personally want in a Star Wars game. Now, yeah, there are other Star Wars games that I love that are not on the Switch that I would probably rank above this. Something like X-Wing vs. TIE Fighter, or something like Jedi Fallen Order. But for the games that are on the Switch, nothing stands higher than the original Knights of the Old Republic. Knights of the Old Republic gets an S. Now, I have never played Knights of the Old Republic 2 before I started playing it on the Switch, and when I started, there were some pretty nasty bugs in the game, stuff that was going to prevent you from completing the game, for one, and I held off on reviewing it for a little bit because I wanted to see how quickly Aspyr, who provided me with a review code for this game, would react to it. And they got it fixed up pretty darn quickly, and so for the first time, diving into Knights of the Old Republic 2 has been pretty enjoyable. I look at it and I realize that it's not nearly as polished a game as the first one was. Like, you can tell this was handed off to a second studio, and they're doing their best to make something really magical, but it doesn't quite hit every beat that it needs to. There's things that feel like they're missing. There's things that feel a bit rushed. There's animations that don't really work. There's shadows that disappear and reappear. It's just one of those things where if the game had more time in development and had more opportunity to have these issues fixed, I think this game would have been received more fondly. Now, there are some patches coming down the road where we're going to be able to get some of the mods that the community has made as an official patch for the game, which I applaud Aspyr for doing. I think that's pretty incredible. It does suck that we're going to lose our progress when that happens, I will say that, but I guess it's a small sacrifice. I mean, I'm going to start over from scratch just to get back to where I'm at, which I don't really care for that, but you know, when I originally ranked this, I actually had the game ranked as an A, but as I'm talking about this, I think some of the issues inherent to what the game has and the fact that we are going to have to restart when we get that patch down the road does need to knock it down a little bit. I'm going to give it a B+, but it could have been better. It could have been an A.
All right, let's get started. In the next area, you'll find some training remotes. These will help you learn how...
Star Wars Jedi Knight Jedi Academy is something that I have wanted to love for a long time. It's something that I have played or started to play repeatedly on many occasions, and there's just something about this game that does not click for me. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the goofy camera. I don't know if it's the very flighty controls, the unintuitive weapon layouts and lightsaber wielding and force powers and how to use them with a controller. I don't know, this one just does not click for me. And it didn't click for me on the PC either, so I don't think it's it being translated to be on a controller. It's just not a game for me. It's something that I want to like, and I think there's promise here. Like, I think it's really clever to set a game in Luke's Jedi Academy back in Legends before, you know, Disney wiped everything out. But it just, I don't know, it just does not connect for me. I'm going to keep playing it because it's something that I kind of feel like I need to beat. I need to finish it. But it's not something I'm in a rush to play terribly often. I don't think it does anything terribly poorly, but it doesn't do anything exceptional either. This is the very definition of a middle-of-the-road game. I give Jedi Academy a C.
We're investigating a cult that's been cropping up everywhere.
Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast, does some things very well, like putting you in the shoes of Kyle Katarn. As a Star Wars Legends fan and someone who has read a ton of Star Wars novels, this is a home run for me. I love that I get to play as Kyle. I love that it focuses more on a natural first-person perspective and doesn't stick you in a weird third-person perspective, but then there's all the things it doesn't do well, like the toggling of crouch. You have to actually hold the button down to keep your character crouched to get under things. And you don't actually go under things, you just duck. You can't climb under anything. You have to put yourself out into, you know, open air, which means you're going to get shot. The targeting's a little funky, the graphics aren't spectacular, and the gameplay is kind of just as loosey-goosey as it was in the first Jedi Knight game. It's, again, it doesn't do anything terribly poorly. The story's interesting at the very least, but it doesn't do anything terribly exceptional either. Again, the very definition of a middle-of-the-road game, Jedi Outcast gets a C.
That was close.
The other review code that I was offered by Aspire was for Star Wars The Force Unleashed, and I have never played the original Wii version of The Force Unleashed. I've only ever played it on the Xbox 360, the PS3, and PC, so when I got into this game, I was a little confused because I didn't remember it looking like this. Like, I legitimately thought that I was getting some signals crossed in my head by playing this, because it never occurred to me that the one that would be ported to the Switch would be the Wii version, because why wouldn't you just port the Xbox 360 version? That didn't make a lick of sense to me when I got the game and I first played it. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me now. Now, as a fan of The Force Unleashed, and as someone who really loved the original console releases, and I continue to enjoy the game on PC because the Steam version is spectacular, this just doesn't feel right. Like, it doesn't feel like The Force Unleashed. It feels very loose. It actually feels like it has a lot of the same problems that Jedi Academy did, where it's kind of loosey-goosey, the camera's a little weird. It's just cleaned up a little bit in the gameplay department because it feels more natural and it feels more modern because, I mean, let's face it, it's 10 years newer. But it just doesn't work for me. Like, it's not a bad game. And I think there is promise here. I think there's some good style here, and I think there's good ideas, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it connects correctly to me because I am continuously comparing it to that original console and original PC release. It's not a failure. It's not even below average. It's just very middle of the road. I am giving Star Wars The Force Unleashed on the Switch a C.
There'll be no escape for the princess this time.
Secure the airlock and prepare the escape pods.
All right, so let's talk about one of the bigger games on the list here, and that is LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga, a game covering all 9 films from the Star Wars saga, and there's a lot to really, really like about this game. The graphics look fantastic for a LEGO game. The animations are plussed over previous LEGO games. The storylines are big. The levels look great. There's tons of unlockables. There's a lot to really like. There's also a lot to not like about this game, and it feels like they're trying to do too much. Like, it feels like it's too big of a project for one game, because the levels, while they look nice, are very short. The collectibles are way too numerous to want to bother. Like, it's an overwhelming amount of things to find and unlock in this game. And it's just, as someone who has loved the LEGO games for a long time, since they first started releasing licensed LEGO games on consoles back on the PS3 and Xbox 360 era, I just really wanted to fall in love with this game, and every time I play it, it's just too much. It's an overwhelming title that just has too much going on for it. And that's not to say it's a bad game, because it's not. It's still a fun game. It's still a good game. It still does a lot of stuff really well. I would actually say this is an above-average title, but it just doesn't live up to the expectations I've had from previous LEGO Star Wars games, or just LEGO games in general. When I look at something like LEGO DC Supervillains, which is also on the Switch, that game had a lot in it as well, but it worked. It was cohesive. It felt like it was put together the right way. This one just feels disjointed. It's still a very good game. I'm going to give it a B, but I just feel like it could have been so much more.
Thank you to Aspire for the review codes for both Knights of the Old Republic and Force Unleashed. Really appreciate you guys providing those to allow me to complete this entire video, showing off every single game that has been released so far on the Nintendo Switch featuring the characters from Star Wars. There's a lot of really great games here. There's a couple that don't quite hit for me, but I know for a lot of people they really love them. And I'm glad that they're available and have been made available on the Nintendo Switch. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my rankings, and if you want to rank your own, the link to do so will be down below. Let me know if there's any I really need to revisit and take another look at. Thanks to my patrons you guys are seeing on screen right now. Truly appreciate your support. Couldn't do this without you. So until next time, remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.